Hey guys, I'm Urizi. This story is all about what if Naruto turns into a fox during a full moon. Pre-timescope, no Biju, Konoha is a village of ninjas who hunt demons. Naruto is a ninja with secrets. And tonight is the night of a full moon. Before we proceed with the story, please like and subscribe to this channel if you liked the video, and don't forget to check the description for the other works of the author if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 46, Party. Thursday morning dawned bright and clear. Naruto rolled out of bed as soon as the first sunbeam entered his window and staggered towards breakfast, half asleep. He inhaled whatever was set in front of him and then visited the cabin's crude little bathroom to brush his teeth and shower. The icy water, it was always cold as there was no water heater, completely woke him up, and he raced off to dress and then head for the porch to wait for his training to start. It had become his morning routine ever since being brought out to the remote mountain cabin. He would get up as early as he could, eat breakfast, train, eat lunch, train, eat dinner, and then train into the night, sometimes until he dropped. On weekends, the break times for eating and resting were a bit longer as he was spending time with his mother, but the training she put him through was just as intense, if not more so, than what he endured on weekdays. When Naruto skidded out onto the porch, he found his trainer dressed in Umbu gear, minus the mask, instead of his Jonin uniform, which he had been wearing since coming out to the cabin. "What's up?" he asked, tilting his head. "Is training going to be super hard today?" "No," his father chuckled. "No training today?" Naruto blinked a couple of times. "The finals are tomorrow," the Umbu explained. "And the best way to prepare isn't to tire yourself out, but to relax and gather your strength. So once you pack up your things, I'll be taking you back to Konoha." The boy's mouth went dry. The last few weeks, all he'd focused on was making through the day's training. There was no future, only the present. Now the distant future was suddenly not distant. Tomorrow he would be pitted against a batch of real live demons in front of the whole village. "Do you think I'm ready for the finals?" The man looked a bit surprised by the question, but he answered with a warm smile. "Yes. You're certainly more prepared for the arena than when I first brought you out here. Just focus on doing your best and be careful. It's just a test, nothing worth getting yourself seriously hurt over." His gloved hand ruffled Naruto's hair and then gave him a gentle shove back towards the interior of the cabin. "Now pack your things so we can get back to the village." "Okay," Naruto muttered as he fixed his hair and went to do as he was told. He should be excited. The long days of arduous training were over. He was going back to Konoha where he would be with his mother again. It should be great. Yet what he mostly felt was a vague sense of dread. No training today. Sasuke frowned from his seat on Kakashi's couch, which also served as his bed. "Nope," the masked Jonin confirmed. "Check your weapons and supplies, and relax. There's no sense in wearing you out the day before the finals." "But shouldn't I make up for those lost days?" "Don't worry about it," Kakashi said as he oiled and polished an odd short sword that Sasuke had seen displayed in the Jounin's apartment, but never used. "You don't have to worry about missing a few days. I'm sure you'll place well. Even though I'm at a disadvantage compared to other genin who didn't miss any training time." Kakashi lifted his eye from the blade that he was polishing and stared at Sasuke from across the room for a minute. "Relax," he advised. "It was only a few days. It's not like you're in Naruto's position." Sasuke flinched. His teammate would have been the clear underdog even if his father hadn't gone and stabbed him because of how late he'd transferred into the academy and how weak his ninja background was. But Naruto had been stabbed and seriously hurt, and there was no telling how many days of training he'd missed because, aside from Hinata's mysterious encounter, no one but the blonde's mother had seen him since the attack. "Naruto's still going to participate in the finals?" the ex-Uchiha asked. "I haven't heard anything about him withdrawing," Kakashi shrugged and returned his gaze to his polishing. "So it seems that he's still set to compete." "Oh." Sasuke shifted uncomfortably on the couch before pulling his weapon pouch out from under the furniture and checking his supplies as his sensei had suggested. He wasn't sure why he was so worried about how he would perform. It wasn't like he had a clan's reputation to uphold or a father to impress anymore. The only people left in his life that he really cared about doing well for were his mother and brother, and they would be happy no matter how he did so long as he came out alive. Considering what had happened earlier in the week, he should probably feel lucky that he was still able to participate in the finals. He still couldn't remember who had attacked him or why, but he'd recovered quickly and felt fine. Aside from eating up a few days of training time, the whole incident didn't seem to have any serious consequences. Just as Sasuke finished checking his weapons inventory, there was a knock at the apartment door. His sensei set aside his short sword and cautiously walked over to see who it was. But there was no visitor, only a folded piece of paper that had been slipped under the door. The Jonin schemed the message and his visible eye crinkled, indicating a smile. It seems that the Yamanakas and Akimichis are hosting an informal pre-finals party this evening. They're celebrating Shikamaru's advancement to the last trial, and all finalists and friends of finalists are welcome to come. Kakashi glanced up from the note to regard his student. Are you going to go? Ino would be there as her clan was one of the hosts and her teammate, Shikamaru, was one of the guests of honor. Sakura would probably also be there as he and Naruto were both finalists. And when they were together and he was nearby, the fights they would get into over him. No, Sasuke decided with a shudder. No way. Naruto dumped his bags beside his mattress back in Mangetsu's rather barren house in Konoha and dusted his hands in satisfaction. There were no dresser drawers to fill or hangers in the closet, so he really couldn't unpack a lot of his things. All he really could do was put his toothbrush and shampoo in the bathroom, and he could do that later. His mother would be over any minute and he wasn't about to waste time trying to figure out what to do with his possessions. He'd already changed clothes in preparation for his return from the mountains. For training he'd initially dressed in a torn pair of jean shorts and a t-shirt that was on its last legs. But now that he was relaxing for the day, he'd dressed nicer in one of the new outfits his mother had bought for him: long khaki shorts, an orange and black t-shirt, and a dark blue hooded jacket over it. Bounding down the stairs, Naruto almost collided with a wall in his haste. Is she here yet? He asked the masked Umbu leaning against the kitchen countertop. No, Mangetsu said, fingering the wolf mask hanging from his belt. There's no need to rush. There is still 10 minutes before she's due to arrive. Yeah, well, I didn't want to be late, Naruto shrugged, taking a seat at the table. So are there any plans for today? I don't know, the Umbu replied. You'll have to ask your mother when she gets here. I need to go check in with the Hokage and find out about my next assignment. Your next assignment? Naruto repeated. Your training for the finals is complete, his father shrugged. I might be assigned to shadow you and act as protection for a while longer. I might be ordered to do something else. The trials are a security nightmare and Umbu is always busy, even during quiet years. Oh, Naruto muttered in dismay. So, you might not get to watch me in the arena. I might not, he nodded. But your mother will definitely be there, and if I miss watching it, she'll tell me all about it. Okay, the genin agreed, slumping lower in his chair. Training had been hard and frustrating, especially in the first few days. But he knew that he'd improved his skills, so all the suffering had been well worth it. He'd sort of looked forward to showing off his new strength to his trainer and getting his feedback on his performance. At least Mom will see me fight for sure, he thought as he traced circles on the tabletop with his index finger. She helped train me too, even if most of it is stuff I probably shouldn't use in public yet. Still, a sense of disappointment lingered. As much as he hated to admit it, and he still hadn't done so out loud, his father wasn't a bad guy. He was just as good a teacher as Kakashi or Jiraiya was. In some ways he was better because he was a werewolf. And he took very good care of Naruto. He always made sure he'd eaten enough, had enough water, and the handful of times the boy had collapsed from exhaustion he'd always woken up in his bed safe and sound. Ah, she's here. Naruto jerked his head up from the invisible patterns he'd been doodling with his finger to see Mangetsu heading for the back door. A minute later he returned with Naruto's mother almost stepping on his heels. As soon as she caught sight of Naruto, she grinned wildly and gave him a brief but smothering hug. You're finally wearing some new clothes. She beamed. I didn't wear them before because I didn't want to ruin them, Naruto huffed. Well, let's go show them off, his mother suggested, nodding towards the back door. Are you ready to get out of here? And go where? The boy asked. Anywhere you want, She shrugged. I was thinking of visiting Ichiraku's for lunch, but that's still a few hours off. Okay, Naruto hesitantly agreed, still feeling a bit uneasy about wandering the village streets. He slid off his chair and shadowed his mother to the exit. She got some information on how to work the security seals laid into the door from his father and then gave his father a kiss goodbye, which Naruto did his best to ignore. After that, the man flashed Naruto a smile and slipped the wolf mask over his face. Have fun, the Umbunin said with a wave. But not too much fun. And then he vanished into thin air as if he'd never been there. Okay, Naruto sighed as his shoulders slumped. Why the gloomy face? His mother asked with an arched eyebrow. You miss Daddy already? That's not it at all. The genin denied hotly, which just made his mother laugh. Well, that's one of the downsides to being a ninja, she told him. The call of duty can put a serious crimp into time with friends and family. She clasped a hand to his shoulder and steered him out into the badly overgrown backyard. Now let's go have some fun. But not too much fun. Naruto's first thought upon his arrival was that this had not been a good idea. Hey, isn't that? It is. Didn't he die? What's he doing here? Is it safe? The day had gone pretty well up to now. Naruto had followed his mother around to some of her favorite spots in Konoha. They had lunch at Ichiraku's, and dinner at a barbecue restaurant that he was pretty sure that Chuji loved as the name had sounded familiar. But then as the sun was going down they ran across Iruka-sensei. He really didn't see why his mother and Iruka-sensei didn't get along. Surely his mother had been in the village long enough by now for Iruka-sensei to see that she wasn't a bad person like he seemed to think that she had been at first. And surely Iruka-sensei would have relaxed by now and let his mother see that the Chunin could be a friendly guy. But still when they crossed paths there was palpable tension between the two adults that left Naruto baffled. The genin tried to strike up conversations with them, but every attempt sputtered out swiftly. He was about ready to give up for the time being and ask his mother if they could go somewhere else when his academy sensei mentioned that he was on his way to a party the Yamanakas were throwing so that he could congratulate old students. His mother got all excited when she heard that and wanted to know where the party was. She wanted to meet more of his friends, see old friends of hers, and parties were always fun. Not giving it much thought, Naruto agreed that it sounded like fun and he wanted to go, but the moment he arrived at the crowded yard someone noticed him, and then it was like everyone was staring at him. Crap, he cringed and fought the impulse to duck into his mother's shadow. Crap. Coming here was a terrible idea. What if some Uchiha were here? They would come after him and the party would be ruined. What's all the staring and whispering for? His mother demanded to the dozens of anxiously watching faces. For the last time, I didn't spike the punch that year. I got wasted along with everyone else. If I was the spiker, I would have stayed sober to watch all the fun. What? Iruka-sensei scowled. What are you talking about? Hey, Uzumaki. A boisterous woman's voice called out. Come to crash the party. You're only a party crasher when you're uninvited, Inuzuka. His mother shouted back. The cluster of stairs parted to reveal a fierce-looking woman with short brown hair and the red triangle facial tattoos of the Inuzuka clan. At her heels was an equally fierce-looking large dog with black and gray fur, a torn ear, and an eye patch. The feral pair walked up to his mother, with only the wolfish-looking dog paying Naruto any attention. If you're not a crasher, who are you here for? The Inuzuka woman asked. Her dark eyes slid left towards Iruka. You here with him? No. His mother snorted and dropped her hand on top of the blonde boy's head. This is my date. The Inuzuka grunted and glanced down at him. Ah, it's you. Kiba's still smarting a bit over his loss. Hi, Kiba's mom, Naruto hesitantly greeted, trying not to squirm. You smell odd, the dark-furred dog remarked, and Naruto felt a spike of jealousy that it could talk fine and he couldn't when he got furry. I shouldn't smell funny, Naruto argued. I took a shower this morning. Kiba's mother let out a short bark of laughter and grinned down at him. You knocked that nasty sludge out of my kid and probably saved him a lot of pain. She tossed her head, indicating that he should proceed further into the party. Go have some fun. I have some catching up to do with Red here. Naruto skirted around Kiba's mother and her dog and ventured onto the lawn. It was a wide grassy area dotted with a few picnic tables and clusters of people. Along the side of the house was a line of tables weighed down with all kinds of snack foods and drinks. The party guests widely ranged in age from the young Chunin hopefuls and some younger siblings, to their parents and a couple of old folk who could have been grandparents. Most of them looked like Konoha citizens, but one knot of people seemed to be from Taki. Even though he'd eaten dinner, he had some room for dessert and there looked to be a tasty variety of cookies and sweets on the snack table. Naruto hesitated, and then scampered for the sweets, aiming to grab what he wanted and then retreat to a shadowy spot under some trees where he would hopefully avoid notice. Attention was something he usually didn't mind, a lot of times he even craved it, but after the stairs and with all the crazy things that had happened before he left to train he felt like standing back from any sort of spotlight. Chocolate chip cookie, you are mine. Hey, Naruto. He paused, hand halfway to his intended cookie target, and looked over to see Chuji with a little plate heaping with all sorts of goodies, and a thing or two still in his mouth. Hey, Chuji. Naruto said slowly. You okay? The chubby genin asked around his current mouthful. There have been all sorts of crazy rumors. Yeah, I'm okay, Naruto nodded and snagged the cookie. Good, Chuji smiled and put his full focus on consuming what he'd put on his small plate. Naruto grabbed a few other cookies, a brownie, and a cup of punch and was about to quiet, out of the way corner when he almost crashed into Kiba with Akamaru perched on his head. Hi, the whiskered genin greeted cautiously, unsure of what to expect as he had knocked Kiba out the competition. Hey, Kiba grunted sourly. Hi, Naruto. Akamaru cheerfully yipped from his perch. Thanks for knocking that icky black stuff out of me, I guess, the Inuzuka boy grumbled, looking off to the side in discomfort. And thanks for sticking up for Hinata. But after the trials are over, I want a rematch. Now he met Naruto's gaze squarely. I wasn't in my right mind in our match, and I didn't fight with Akamaru. It's like I wasn't fight with my right hand. I want to fight again and I want it to be a real fight. Sure, Naruto grinned. And I'll kick your butt again. I'm way better than I was when I beat you the first time. Sure you will, Kiba scoffed. And I love cats. Naruto glared. Kiba and his thing against cats, grr. Naruto. Turning to the new voice, he was a bit taken aback to see Sakura hurrying over to him like she was genuinely happy to see him, which was incredibly weird. He managed to smile, though. But when he noticed Ino looked just as pleased to see him, he really got confused. What, is Sasuke hiding under the table next to me or something? The pair of girls converged on him, unwittingly forming a sloppy half-circle with Kiba and Akamaru and Chuji, which trapped Naruto against a section of the snack table. You made it, Sakura smiled, sounding relieved. No one knew where you were, so I didn't think you'd get an invitation. I followed Iruka-sensei here, Naruto shrugged and bit into one of his cookies. Excellent. Ino grinned, an odd glint in her blue eyes. Now that you're here, you can set some things straight. Naruto stopped chewing. Eh? Troublesome, Shikamaru sighed, having appeared at Chuji's side and tightening the half-circle. Can't you let him eat, Ino? Chuji asked. Now, Naruto, Ino said, ignoring Chuji's plea. Are you or are you not a werewolf? He swallowed hard, the cookie suddenly not very tasty. Yeah, can we not talk about this now? Why is there any doubt? Kiba snorted. My mom said that he was, so he is. Naruto felt himself start to sweat. I'm really not liking this party. But Hinata saw some things that don't make any sense, so I'm going to the source, Ino argued. What are you talking about? Kiba frowned. Hinata never told us about seeing anything. Why would she tell you and not me or Shino? For it and I happened upon her shortly after she saw it, Ino said haughtily. Ino pig, Sakura grumbled. We caught her before she could get help from her sensei, the Yamanaka continued. Your sensei must have told her not to blab about it. Well, what did she see, then? The Inuzuka boy demanded. I really want to get out of here now, Naruto gulped, looking for an escape but not seeing one. She said that he... Hello students, Iruka-sensei greeted, interrupted whatever Ino had been about to say. The whole group turned and said hello back, trained from their years of schooling. Shikamaru, congratulations on advancing to the finals, the Chunin smiled. And the rest of you, I'm sure that you did well and you'll do much better next year. Naruto spied a gap between Kiba and Shikamaru and slipped through it without hesitation. He'd already gotten plenty of congratulations from Iruka-sensei before ever arriving at the party, so he wasn't going to miss anything. Escape from the cluster of old classmates and their very uncomfortable conversation was all that he focused on. Free of the claustrophobic group by the snacks, Naruto felt better able to breathe and went about finding a quiet spot to enjoy his dessert. He ducked under a clump of trees where it was much darker as the leaves blocked the illumination from the lamps and torches that lit the evening. He thought he'd be alone there, but he wasn't. Leaning up against one of the tree trunks was Kakashi-sensei, somehow reading his beloved book in the poor light. And sitting near his feet was Sasuke, nibbling on some little crunchy appetizers that were topped with vegetables. The blonde hesitated before slinking up his silver-haired sensei, hoping for some protection if he was noticed again. "Hi, Kakashi-sensei." "Hello, Naruto," the Jonin smiled, peering over the orange cover of his book. "It's nice to see you again. How are you feeling?" "I'm good," Naruto replied, feeling relaxed enough to finish the cookie that he'd started eating. "Good," Kakashi nodded and went back to reading, or pretending to read, or whatever he was really doing. There was a short stretch of silence while Naruto consumed a few cookies and sipped at his punch, careful to sniff at it beforehand to make sure that it wasn't spiked with anything. "Sasuke, you okay?" Naruto asked, recalling what his mother had told him about what had happened only a few days ago. "Yeah," Sasuke grunted, sounding supremely annoyed. "Cool." The blonde nibbled on the brownie and glanced down at his teammates' snacks. "What are you eating?" "Things with tomato in them," Sasuke muttered tersely. "No cookies?" the whiskered boy asked. "I don't like sweet things," the dark-haired boy responded. "There's something wrong with you," Naruto decided. "HN." Both boys felt silent, chewing on their food while their teacher stood between them. Naruto watched as Sakura and Ino dissolved into some kind of argument. Kiba took Akamaru to go bother Shino and Chuji, and Shikamaru remained by the snacks. Relief seeped over him and he sighed deeply as he slipped off the hook, at least for the time being. "Why are you talking to me?" Sasuke asked suddenly. "I should be the last person you want to be around, considering what happened." "You're a jerk, but your dad is a million times worse," Naruto shrugged and crushed his empty plastic punch cup. "He stabbed me, you didn't. You're my teammate and a bunch of bad stuff's happened to you, too. So?" He shrugged again. "Should I not be talking to you?" Sasuke, the ex-Uchiha, said nothing in response. Puzzled, Naruto went back to watching the partygoers milling about and chatting with each other. He hadn't thought much about whether or not he should avoid Sasuke. The guy was on his team and now he wasn't part of the clan that was out for his blood, so it didn't seem that he had much reason to. Sure, he was a nosy jerk before, but he wasn't there. He didn't do any stabbing. He probably didn't have anything to do with it. Certainly not anymore cause he's not an Uchiha and... Hey, is that Hinata? There was a small decorative lawn fountain thing several yards away from where he was and, sure enough, Hinata was standing near it. Her bully cousin was there, too, and a younger girl with the same sort of eyes the older Hyugas both had. It looked like Hinata was trying to talk to Neji, but he was just staring down at her like she was an irritating insect, and the little Hyuga was watching both of them with either mild annoyance or complete disinterest. "I need to apologize. She totally hadn't deserved being a victim of the freak-out he'd had before the last full moon. He'd almost hurt her, and over something that hadn't really been a big deal. His father had theorized over lunch one day that perhaps all the stress he'd been under from being almost assassinated had multiplied his shock, overwhelmed him, and led him to overreact the way that he'd had. Naruto wasn't sure if that made sense or not, but that didn't change the fact that he needed to say he was sorry for scaring her and almost clawing her. So he made a slight detour to throw out his crushed cup and then approached the white-eyed trio. "Don't see why you are speaking to me," Neji was saying to Hinata, who looked like she was trying to shrink down into nothingness. "Do you think that empty flattery will somehow erase the past? Such efforts are wasteful and pointless." "But and Neji-san, I really do hope that you will do well in the finals, Hinata protested feebly. I mean it. Neji stared at her coldly and Hinata wilted further. Hey, you, Naruto snapped. Leave her alone. If she says she means it, she means it. The older boy turned his frosty gaze disdainfully to the whiskered genin, his white eyes so flat they looked dead. Your fate is a dark one, Neji commented. It can only have one conclusion, werewolf. Are you really a werewolf? The smallest Hyuga asked dubiously. You sound like an Uchiha, Neji, Naruto retorted, ignoring the little girl's question. I am no Uchiha, Neji replied tautly, his stoic expression tightening slightly in anger. I am merely pointing out fact. You are a werewolf and your fate is to die. Everybody dies someday, Naruto shot back with a scowl. What I am doesn't change that. It determines the manner in which you will die, Neji countered coolly. You will die young and at a hunter's hand, that is, if your curse does not consume you. I don't see why you are seeking to become a Chunin. No one will ever trust you, the Uchiha will always be ready to slay you, and the moon will one day be your undoing. Your fate is inescapable. Shut up. Naruto snarled, curling his fingers into fists. I don't believe in fate. I'll find my own future. And after I give Kiba his rematch, I'll kick your ass, Dateba yo. Is something wrong? His mother asked, intruding on the scene. Neji's being a jerk. Naruto explained, narrowing his eyes at the boy who was giving his mother an icy look. Neji. The red-haired woman frowned and tilted her head as she studied the Hyuga boy, and then her face split into a smile. Oh, I remember you. You were the cutest little baby. You'd always look so solemn, but if anyone made a funny face you'd smile and giggle and it was just so adorable. Naruto blinked. Neji, really? When his mother nodded emphatically, he started to snigger. White eyes flashing, Neji stormed off without another word. Who are you? The smaller girl asked, eyeing Naruto's mother curiously. I'm Uzumaki Kushina, the woman replied. Who might you be? Hyuga Hanabi, the little girl answered. How do you know what Nejina-san was like as a baby? I've never seen you or heard of you before. Well, years ago, I used to live around here and... Seeing that his mother was now ensnared in a conversation with this third Hyuga, Naruto grabbed Hinata's arm and towed her around to the other side of the fountain so that he could apologize properly, and without his mother watching and maybe trying to help him. Hey, Hinata, about that thing a couple of weeks ago. He rubbed at the back of his head, and then sketched an awkward bow. I'm really sorry for scaring you. I was totally out of line with that. It's all right, she murmured, fidgeting with her index fingers. Are you feeling better and now? Yeah, I'm all better, he cheerfully informed her. And you're still in the finals? Yep, he nodded, swallowing as his throat went a bit dry. Then I wish you the best, the timid girl stuttered. That you stay safe and achieve the rank of Chunin. Thanks. Naruto grinned, though it was a bit forced. I'll totally dominate my round. At least, I'll try. I hope. Chapter 47, The Final Trial. The hour was so early that there was no hint of the sun on the horizon. Several miles outside of Konoha, well out of range of any security patrols, shadowy figures converged. Orochimaru and his top ninjas met with Udai, his father Yuma, and their chosen ninjas came together over a detailed map of Konoha lit by a flashlight as final deployments were agreed upon. Orochimaru, as an expert on Konoha, already had a solid plan of attack in mind with several high-priority targets marked out. There was no argument from the Uzushio contingent, they only provided final numbers on their ninjas and enslaved demons and werewolves. The talks lasted nearly an hour before the two groups parted and returned to the main bodies of their respective forces to give final briefings and move into their attack positions. Orochimaru-sama, is it wise to give these Uzushio-nin such trust? Seikon, the dominant half of the twin ninja, asked with care. What's to say that they won't turn on us during the assault? It was they who approached us with the idea for this attack, the cold-blooded Hanyu replied. It would be counterproductive of them to sabotage the strike that they first proposed. He chuckled darkly. In fact, It would be suicidal of them. Such an action would cause the attack to fail, Konoha would survive, and then the Leaf would punish their disloyal ally. I don't see why we haven't killed their leader and taken his place to give us complete control over Uzushio, Konoha complained. Such a plot requires detailed information on the leader and the village in order to have any chance of success, Orochimaru explained as they walked. And not only do we lack such information, Uzushio has no clear Kage in charge. Instead, their village is managed jointly by the leaders of all the major clans, and replacing 10 ninja that we barely know anything about is simply out of the question. We need to get some better spies, Tayuya groused. We don't know jack shit about what goes on inside Uzushiagaku no Sato. Language, Tayuya, Jiroba sighed. Espionage takes time, my dear, Orochimaru hissed. If I had foreseen such potential for betrayal in Uzushiagaku, I would have had them penetrated long before their offer came before me. In truth, the Serpentine ninja was quietly dismayed at his spy's utter failure to glean any inside information on his allies. Smaller villages were harder to spy on as strangers and newcomers had a much more difficult time blending in and avoiding scrutiny. There were also fewer native individuals that could be turned into double agents. And worse, the entire village of Uzushio seemed even more paranoid than the legendary Hanzo the Salamander. Every spy the snake had sent the village gates had failed to even peek inside. Such a highly guarded place would take years of patient work to infiltrate, and Orochimaru had never thought to try until Udai had first approached him mere months ago. Don't worry about our friends, the half-snake advised them. In the unlikely event that they do try a double cross, I have a few contingencies in place. Reaching inside his tunic, Orochimaru retrieved a small pouch that contained metal discs covered in seals and hanging from leather cords. He handed each of his bodyguards one of the objects, with Seikon receiving a second one for his napping brother, Yakon. Jiroba also accepted a second one to deliver to Kimimaro when he had the opportunity. What are these? Tayuya asked. Master control seals, the Hanyu smirked. Should I give you permission to use them, they will allow you to take direct control of any creature, werewolf, or demon, that the Uzushionin have enslaved with the collars that I gave them. The Master Seal I possess can even deactivate all the enslaved creatures under Uzushio's control so that they may rage against whoever they please. Wicked, Konoha grinned in appreciation. Indeed, Orochimaru smiled coldly. Should they try to stab me in the back, they'll have their own wolves at their throats. Today will be a glorious day. Udai crowed as he strolled back to the waiting point with his father, several paces ahead of their chosen generals. Don't get ahead of yourself, my son, Yuma advised. It is the height of foolishness to declare victory before the battle has even begun. Remember, no plan survives contact with the enemy. You can't honestly believe that Konoha will survive our assault, Udai frowned. They have no idea that we're coming. Otherwise they would have cancelled or postponed the trials, or made some preemptive strike. Oh? Then why did they eject Koshoku? Yuma countered. Because Kushina mounted a campaign to get him thrown out so that she could take over his position, Udai replied. Why are you playing devil's advocate? To remind you to be cautious and focused, Udai, his father responded. The Hoshitama, Furukawa, and Uzumaki all were able to vanish under our very noses without any warning. With an Uzumaki already in Konoha, it's conceivable that the Leaf has some warning. It can't be anything specific, Udai snorted. That would incriminate themselves, if not doom themselves. Even before the Kyuubi's rise, Kitsune had always been viewed with suspicion by humans. And once the monstrous Tenko had blackened their race's name beyond repair, no Kitsune would dare openly approach any human, warrior or civilian. Now, after a few centuries of believing the absolute worst of Kitsune, and believing that they were extinct, it would still be renewed genocide to deal straight with humans. If the Uzumaki were completely open with Konoha, they would die and it would be open season on Uzushiagaku no Sato. If the Uzumaki were only half-truthful claiming that they were humans and the rest of their village was Kitsune, they would still suffer and be mistrusted. Back during the slaughter, humans that had allied themselves with Kitsune had paid dearly. Anything more than the vaguest of warnings and the Uzumaki would be slitting their own throats. The Uzumaki and their few feeble allies were backed into a corner, desperate, but not suicidal. Still, even a vague warning could complicate things, Yuma shrugged. And then there is Orochimaru to consider, as well. What's there to consider? Yudai smirked. A few gifts and the offer of vengeance and we have him eating out of our hands. We may be playing him for a fool now, but he is not a real fool, the older fox replied. We must assume that he has some contingency in place in the event that we turn on him, which we will. Whatever it is, I doubt it will be enough. However, if we aren't vigilant, his contingency could hurt us. Hurting us is a long way from destroying us, Yudai scoffed, and earned himself a cuff to the back of his head. Our numbers are still small. Yuma chastised. We can't afford to spend our forces like water. Every Kitsune lost is one too many. Just because we have almost double the numbers of ninja than Orochimaru believes doesn't mean that we can afford heavy losses. Uzushiagakuer no Sato had always been viewed as the smallest of the ninja villages with the lowest number of active ninja it could put onto the field. However, because of Kitsune's long lives, this wasn't entirely accurate. Kitsune who became too old to masquerade as humans were forced into early retirement, and younger foxes become ninja to take their place. Now, several centuries after their village's founding, the true number of warriors they could field was a little over 40% larger than any outsider believed. When they had given the size of their forces to Orochimaru, they had been completely truthful in regards to the number of werewolves and subjugated demons they had brought along. They had not been entirely truthful in regards to their stated number of ninjas, and Orochimaru would never suspect it. The numbers that the snake knew seemed reasonable considering that they had to leave a skeleton force to protect their village and they had lost some ninja to a rebellion, their cover story for the loss of the three clans. He would never dream that they had a second smaller wave of ninja waiting further out, ready to move in once the attack was in full swing with their own objectives in mind, including one special group led by Kurohi Yuta himself that was heading straight into the forest of death. I understand your point, father, Yudai grumbled and rubbed at the back of his skull with one hand. But our chances of success are still so very high. Perhaps you're still shaken by the desertion of the Uzumaki, Furukawa, and Hoshitama. At his father's glum silence, he squeezed his sire's shoulder. We know where the Hoshitama are, and it's only a matter of time before we pin down the locations of the other two rogue clans. Once our business in Konoha is settled, we'll make them pay for their treachery. Hey, in the chaos that follows after the leaf burns, we can sell their locations to the other great ninja villages. That is a possibility, Yuma muttered thoughtfully. We'll need to be careful in how the information is framed and delivered. We don't want the four remaining great villages to come after us first instead of them. Yudai beamed as he watched his father's plotting juices start to flow. Konoha is a big step, but only the first of many. It's the day of the finals, why is the village gate even opened? Kotetsu groaned as he sat with his partner in the guard shack just within Konoha's massive gates while the sun steadily climbed into the sky. To make sure any stragglers can get inside, Izumo replied, reviewing the most recent pages in the guest book. Like a half hour ago when that shipping magnate and his entourage showed up. He checked the selection of pens that visitors used to sign the book and glanced over at his pouting partner. Relax, Kotetsu, the gates only stay open until 10 a.m., so it's not like we have a full shift here. Still, the spiky-haired Chunin complained. That doesn't leave us much time to make it to the stadium before the demon slaying starts. We'll make it, Izumo responded. We always do. But we don't always get good seats, Kotetsu retorted. True, the straight-haired Chunin shrugged. We always get seats, though. I guess, we're never stuck standing. Kotetsu snagged one of the pens and twirled it around with his left hand. Still, what? Izumo asked when Kotetsu failed to follow through with his next complaint. More stragglers, the other Chunin said, jerking his head down the road. Sure enough, walking down the road towards the towering gates was a cluster of visitors. Most looked moderately well off, if not wealthy, but there were a couple of elderly people who appeared much poorer. And at the head of the group strutted Jiraiya of the Sunin, looking quite pleased with himself. This looks interesting, Izumo remarked. 10 minutes later, the mixed group that Jiraiya was escorting arrived and the two Chunin started processing them. Hey, Jiraiya-sama, what's up? Kotetsu inquired as he accepted the first batch of identification papers. Well, I just happened to be in the area when these fine folks found themselves on the bad side of some bandits, the white-haired giant boasted. The gentleman that I am, I lent them a hand and sent the bandits on their merry way with a few good kicks for good measure. And when I heard that all these nice civilians were heading to Konoha, I just had to guide them there to make sure they met up with no more trouble. Both Chunin couldn't help but be amused at the legendary warrior's colorful persona. Without any prompting, he went into a detailed retelling of exactly how he'd defeated the bandits. He was surely exaggerating, even though he'd only dealt with common criminals who possessed no magical talents, but that was part of why the old ninja's story was so amusing. I wish all guests were like Jiraiya-sama, Kotetsu sighed once the odd group had been cleared and led into the village by the mighty Sunin. As funny as he was, it was hard to keep track of all the ID those civilians were shoving at us, Izumo complained. Don't worry about it, Kotetsu said as he settled back into his chair. Jiraiya-sama thinks they're okay and he's a far better ninja than both of us combined. I'm sure that he's checked all of those people out before the village gates were even in sight. If any of them weren't right, he would have warned us. I suppose so, Izumo nodded thoughtfully. And at least he made their check-in more fun than it usually is. Yeah, so how much longer until we can close the gates and leave? Oh. Izumo turned to the back of the shack and consulted the wall clock briefly. About half an hour. I wish Jiraiya-sama would come back, Kotetsu sighed, leaning his forehead against the counter. Izumo could only roll his eyes. Naruto stared into the bathroom mirror and eyed his attire critically. Since his preferred ninja uniform and all his spares were ruined, he'd grudgingly accepted his mother's suggestion for an alternative. Today was the first day that he was going to wear it. The only orange part was the shirt with sleeves that stopped at his elbows, and it was a darker, duller shade than he would have liked. The rest was dark gray or black. The pants were black, the sandals were black, the long fingerless gloves were black, and the long vest that made him think of Ero Sennin's outfit was black. The vest jacket thing was fairly plain with only the red kanji for fire embroidered onto the back, and the fingerless gloves had small armor plates that would protect the back of his hands and his forearms. And underneath the orange shirt was a light, loose chainmail shirt, something he'd never bothered with before. His mother had optimized the outfit with his shape-shifting abilities in mind, even though he certainly wasn't going to go and transform in the arena in front of the whole village. The gloves had no fingertips so he wouldn't ruin them by sprouting claws. The loose shirt and long vest covered the seat of his pants, so the little modifications she'd made to them so that he could sprout a tail were well hidden. And everything was fitted loosely enough so that his movement wouldn't be hindered, no matter what shape he was in at the time. I guess it looks okay, he thought reluctantly, rubbing his right thumb over the engraved plate of the hitayate he hadn't yet put on. It's not the same, though. There you are. He flinched and glanced over to the doorway to see his mother grinning at him. Very sharp, she said with great satisfaction. What do you think? I guess it's fine, Naruto muttered. You're so hard to please, his mother sighed and slipped into the bathroom and crouched down beside him. I think it's a good mix of professional ninja and flashy badass. But if you really don't like it, when you grow out of this you can go and pick something else out. Sound fair? Yeah, the boy agreed with a slow nod. Now, she took the hitayate from his hand and smoothed out its blue cloth. Let's make sure you're ready to head to the stadium. But what if I blow it? Naruto blurted out. What if I do terrible and I don't make Chunin? What if? His mother clapped a hand over his mouth, cutting off the torrent of verbal panic. Calm down, she commanded. If you don't get promoted this time you can always undertake the trials again. Don't worry about passing or failing. You've barely been in Konoha training to be a ninja for 3 years, a lot less than anyone else in the trials. You made it all the way to the end, and no matter how you do we're going to have a party afterwards. She smiled at him. Okay. When she removed her hand from his mouth he sighed deeply and nodded. Okay. Good. She tied the hitayate to his forehead and stood up. Now let's get a move on before you're late. Hinata nervously trailed after Kiba as the Inyazuka wandered the stadium in search of the perfect seats with Akamaru on his head. The place was packed with dozens of civilians, foreigners, and off-duty ninja all eager to watch Chunin hopefuls battle dangerous demons. Without Kiba leading the way, Hinata was sure that she would have gotten lost in the overwhelming crowd and never found a seat where she could cheer Shino, Neji, and the rest of her old classmates on. Ha ha. Kiba suddenly crowed and grabbed Hinata's wrist. Come on, I see some good seats. Her teammate dragged her down a flight of stairs and down an aisle to a set of stadium seats that were unoccupied and unreserved. Kiba selected a chair right in the middle and flopped into it, moving Akamaru from the top of his head to the inside of his jacket so that the puppy was just under his chin. Hinata took the seat to his left and fidgeted restlessly with her fingers as her pale gaze dropped into the sunken pit of the arena. This is a great spot, Kiba remarked. It's too bad I'm stuck watching, though. There's always an next year, Kiba-kun, Hinata told him, barely audible over the noise of the surrounding crowd. I am sure you'll do well. Kiba didn't reply, he just pouted a bit and scanned the crowd. Hinata fell silent and tried to get control of her fidgeting fingers as she waited for the finals to begin. She wished that Kurenye-sensei would be sitting with them, but the Jonin apparently had special seating. The girl would have felt more secure to have her teacher nearby, to hear her professional opinion on how the matches were going. Hey, it's Hinata, right? The Hyuga girl jumped a bit and found Tenten, the only member of her cousin's team to have not made it through, speaking to her. Why yes. Are any of these seats saved? The brunette asked, gesturing to the empty seats in the row where Hinata and Kiba were sitting. When Hinata shook her head no, Tenten grinned and claimed one of the chairs for herself. Great. 5 minutes later, Kiba spotted Chuji and called the Akimichi boy over. The chubby youth brought with him several large bags of chips, and Ino and Sakura. While the two boys and Akamaru sat together and crunched on chips, Ino and Sakura parked themselves between Hinata and Tenten and started loudly debating over who would and wouldn't be making Chunin this year. The row of empty seats that Kiba had located was now almost completely filled, with only 2 chairs left open near Chuji. Hinata felt hemmed in with all the empty spaces now gone. She was glad that she was surrounded by familiar faces, but she wished that it was Tenten who was sitting to her left instead of Ino as the blonde girl kept jostling Hinata with her elbow as her debate with Sakura grew more and more heated. This isn't so bad. It's just like being in the classroom, only we're outside instead of indoors. We all know each other. See, Katetsu, we got great seats. Hinata peeked out of the corner of her eye and spotted 2 adult Chunin settling into the last 2 open chairs next to Chuji. A brief flash of anxiety washed over her, but it faded quickly. They were Konoha ninjas, and she remembered seeing them guarding the village gates on several occasions. Perhaps they'll share with us how well our friends are doing down in the arena. Sasuke jammed his fists into his pockets as he navigated the maze of hallways that ran underneath the stadium complex. The section he was traversing was restricted to ninjas either participating or administering the final trial, so it was rather deserted. Kakashi had escorted him to the special entrance and given him directions to the waiting area before splitting off to wherever he was going to sit and observe the matches. When Sasuke reached the staircase that led to the waiting area, he found himself ambushed. Good morning, Sasuke-san. The ex-Uchiha paused and looked to see the older genin, Kabuto, coming out from behind the stairs, light glinting off his glasses. Sasuke remembered him from before the first trial and how oddly helpful he'd tried to be. And he also remembered that Kabuto had backed out of the trials before the tournament in the Forest of Death. What are you doing down here? Sasuke asked warily. I'm in training to be a medic nin, the silver-haired genin cheerfully explained. I helped set up medical supplies in the first aid room and now I'm off to find a seat up in the stadium. Oh. That makes sense. You did well in the Forest of Death, but I wish you luck anyway, Kabuto smiled. Knock those demons dead. The older genin clapped Sasuke on the shoulder. A stab of pain rocketed through the spot where the sealed curse mark was located and Sasuke staggered. Are you alright? Kabuto asked with great concern. Did I hit a bruise? As quickly as it had come, the pain was gone, leaving only a cold, slimy sensation. I'm fine, Sasuke grunted, shaking out his shoulder. I need to get going. Oh, well, good luck. Kabuto called after him as Sasuke started up the stairs. The dark-haired boy grunted. Whatever. The curse mark felt different, wrong, but he didn't waste time getting it looked at. The Umbu had said that the seal would work as long as he wanted it to, and he still wanted it to work. If he went to see a medic, he'd be late and get disqualified from the finals. And he refused to let that happen. He'd worked too hard and his mother had come to watch him. He wouldn't disappoint her. Kushina grinned when she spied Mikoto, and the saved seat next to her. "Have I told you that you're awesome lately?" the redhead asked as she sat in the reserved seat. "Not for a while now," Mikoto replied. "But times have been stressful and busy, so I'm not offended." "Ah, thanks," Kushina laughed. "Man, there are a lot of people here." "There are always a lot of people here," Mikoto said. "My memory must be faulty," Kushina sighed. "I swear it wasn't so hard to find seats at the last final trial that I attended." "It's nice weather we have this year," Mikoto remarked, looking up at the blue, nearly cloudless sky. The Uzumaki nodded. "So, you nervous?" "Yes," Mikoto swallowed. "I think even if things hadn't gone so wrong I would worry. Sasuke is talented and well-trained, I have lots more to worry about than you do," Kushina huffed. Mikoto sighed and gazed down into the sunken pit of the arena for a minute. "You'd think I wouldn't be so worried," the Uchiha murmured. "Itachi went through the same thing, and he was younger than Sasuke is." "It must be a mom thing," Kushina suggested. "We always worry about our babies." "It must be," Mikoto smiled weakly. "I'll worry even though everything will turn out fine." "Yeah," Kushina nodded. "I wish I could be so sure. If only I didn't know better." The Hokage settled into his formal chair, guarded by a pair of his Jonin, in the highest and most prestigious box that provided the ideal view of the battlefield far below. In the past, when the trials were still the international Chunin exams, he would share this space with any Kages who had genin in the running to be Chunin. Now only minor villages could send genin to Konoha and such small villages could rarely afford to send their leaders to personally observe the finals, so standing off to the side were the Jounin senseis of the Oto genin and the two Taki genin. The Taki Jonin was a stern-faced man with several scars and graying hair at his temples. The Oto Jonin was much younger, barely more than a teenager, with white hair, chalky skin, and a dry cough. Neither seemed to be the talkative type and the old Hokage knew he wouldn't be doing much bantering with either of them. A small red toad landed on the railing of the box, hopped down and over to the Hokage's chair, and climbed up to his shoulder. The two Jonin guarding the village leader eyed the amphibian suspiciously, but didn't stop the creature. Hiruzen paid the creature little notice, merely tilting his head slightly so that he could better hear its whispered message. Jiraiya-sama sends his regards and wishes that pretty ladies would take advantage of the hot springs instead of watching bloody demon slaying, it chirped. The Hokage nodded and the toad hopped down to the ground, vanishing in a puff of smoke. "So." The old man sighed and watched as the Chunin hopefuls were paraded out into the middle of the arena so that all of the spectators could see them. "Everything is in place." Naruto tried not to sweat as he fell into single file line down into the arena. The stands that almost completely surrounded the arena were filled with all kinds of people that cheered as the genin were arrayed before them. The crowd was so huge that no matter how hard he tried Naruto couldn't pick out his mother's face from the masses. "Stand up straight now," Shiranui Genma, the proctor for the finals, instructed. "Let them get a good look at who they'll be cheering for today." "Wow," Naruto gulped and licked his dry lips. "This is it." Chapter 48, Gentle Fist, Deadly Touch. "Okay," Genma sighed, drawing the genin's attention away from the vast sea of cheering spectators roiling in the stands high above. "Here's how this is going to work, so pay attention." Naruto gulped and fixed his eyes on the Jonin with the senbon needle clenched in his teeth. "There are 2 rounds, the primary and the bonus. The primary fights are individual match UPS against demons held in the order of the numbers you drew back in the Forest of Death. If you survive, you get lumped with a few other surviving contestants to kill more demons. The scores will be tallied and 1 week from today those deserving promotion will be announced." "Got it." When there were no questions, he unfolded a piece of paper he pulled from his pocket and showed it to them all. "In case you forgot, here are your numbers again. All of you back to the waiting area, now." Genma put the paper away and waved them off. "The first match starts in 10 minutes. The collection of Chunin hopefuls bowed slightly and headed back to the stairs that led up to the waiting area set into the arena wall, halfway between the ground and the bottom of the stands. However, one of them, Hokage Neji, remained behind with the proctor. The pale-eyed boy was up first and apparently didn't see any point in going all the way back to the waiting area and then back down to the center of the arena mere minutes later. Naruto hurried up the stairs and grabbed a good spot at the rail to watch how Neji would do. He had every intention of challenging the older boy to a fight sometime later after giving Kiba the rematch the dog boy had demanded. And he had every intention of winning, so it was important to see what he would be up against so that he could prepare. There isn't a date set yet, Neji, but we're going to fight and I'm going to beat the bully out of you, Dateba yo. High up in the VIP boxes, just below the Hokage's seating and the private seating reserved for the daimyos, a wealthy businessman that managed a very successful shipping company sat surrounded by his assistants and favored employees. The man was slightly overweight with a thick neck and sagging jowls, and not even his very expensive clothing could quite hide his pot belly. One assistant fanned him to make sure that the warm day combined with his weight and heavy clothing didn't cause him to overheat and miss the spectacle. He had arrived very late, much later than he had planned. Normally he arrived in Konoha a week ahead of the finals to enjoy the hospitality of the Leaf Village before watching the fights to see if he would continue favoring Konohanin to protect his highest value cargoes. But he didn't appear to be the least bit disgruntled at only having arrived in the village that morning with no time to relax or settle into a hotel. Gookie. Hey, Gookie. The pudgy businessman lazily turned to find a slightly less hefty, but no less richly dressed, man approaching his cluster of seats from the other side of the VIP box. Yes. Gookie nodded blandly in greeting. I didn't think that you were going to make it this year. The other businessman laughed as he pushed through Gookie's stiff entourage to stand beside his chair. What kept you? Oh, a dozen little business emergencies just important enough to require my personal attention, Gookie sighed, gesturing to the fan-bearer to stop for the moment. When I return, I think I need to reshuffle some staff. Too bad, the slimmer man sighed, shaking his head. Have you decided which genin you'll bet on this year? Gookie took a moment to stroke at his thin mustache before making his choice. I think I will place my money on Sasuke, formerly of the Uchiha clan. He's been disowned. He has something to prove. Mark me down for my usual amount, would you? Of course. The second businessman studied Gookie with something approaching concern. The two men had been friendly acquaintances for many years. They weren't real friends, but he liked to think that he knew Gookie well enough to read the other man accurately. Something seemed off about Gookie today, but he couldn't put his finger on why or what exactly wasn't right. Of course, he repeated with his best business smile. I personally have my money on the first young fighter, Hokage Neji. I've heard many whispers of his great talent, and from what I understand of his family, he has things to prove as well. He chuckled. It should be interesting to see which of us has made the better bet. Indeed we shall, Gookie agreed with an odd smile. Unnerved, but still not really sure why, the other VIP nodded and returned to the other side of the box and several other wealthy merchants and politicians. Gookie paid him and all the other VIPs no mind. His dull gaze was fixed down into the depths of the arena. The genin waiting to confront his demons looked tiny from such a great height. It's too bad he's a branch Hokage. Naruto leaned against the metal railing and stared intently down at Neji's back as he waited for the minutes to run out and his battle to start. I'm watching you, so show me what you've got. You. Hey, Naruto, Shikamaru greeted with his usual bored tone. New clothes? Yeah, Naruto nodded, warily glancing over his shoulder at the Nara boy. He's not going to start asking questions like Ino, right? Hey, Hisa, look. The remaining male Taki genin snickered, gesturing towards Naruto with one of his long knives. It's that little Konohanin in orange. With the new threads I totally didn't recognize him. He actually looks like a competent ninja now. Shut up. Naruto snapped. My old clothes were awesome. Sasuke snorted. They were. Naruto insisted hotly, shooting a glare to his teammate. Your mom picked out those clothes for you, didn't she? The ex-Uchiha responded. Shut up, Naruto muttered, feeling his ears burn a little. Hey, kid, the female Taki Genin said to the whiskered blonde with a glower. How did you manage to rob me back in the forest? That fox thing couldn't have been with you. My sensei said that lesser fox demons only contract with Iwanin. Naruto felt himself start to sweat as every other genin turned to look at him, even the Otonin, Doso, who had been ignoring everyone completely. It's a secret, he decided, turning back around to stare at Neji in the arena again. I'm not telling, so quit staring already. Glancing upwards at the top of the arena wall, Naruto noticed several dozen ninja, at least Chunin in rank, were taking positions all around the ring an equal distance from each other. They knelt down, held out their hands, and for a minute nothing appeared to happen. Then a hazy gray film spread out from their palms and slowly spread outwards until a barrier of magical energy completely separated the restless crowd from the arena without impacting their ability to see what was going on. A barrier? Naruto wondered. What do they need to do that for? Some demons can fly, Shikamaru said. They need to make sure that the civilians are protected. We should all pay attention, Shino commented. Why? Because Neji's battle is about to begin and there is much we might learn from observing it. Naruto looked down from the barrier to see the barred gates set on the far side of the arena start to lift to release Neji's opponents. There were 5 gates, and 4 of them raised up. But only 3 demons immediately appeared. All 3 were red Asiatic imps. They were vaguely baboon-like in appearance with red-brown fur, ugly faces with curving tusks, and tiny red eyes that glowed. The trio shambled into view on all fours with their weapons of choice hanging across their backs. Imps native to their lands were of moderate intelligence as demons went, and they fancied themselves musicians. But what they considered good music made humans want to stab out their own eardrums so they didn't have to hear it. And imp-crafted instruments were primarily used as weapons. Red imps were guitarists. They fashioned their guitars out of stone turtle shells, demon bones, and scavenged wire. Their instruments functioned both defensively and offensively, and combined with the general nasty temperament of imps they made for a challenging foe for young ninja. The ape-like imp demons snarled and hooted as they edged closer to Neji as the proctor vanished from sight, probably using a genjutsu so that the imps wouldn't target him. Neji just stood there, even as the flesh-eating beasts started to circle around him, their claw-like hands reached towards the necks of their guitars. One of the imps got behind Neji and stopped to unshoulder its weapon and spin it faster and faster over its head in preparation to hurl it at the boy's back. Why isn't he moving? Naruto frowned as he watched. That thing will bash his brains in if he doesn't turn around. He does not have to turn around to see them, Lee said. What? Naruto briefly glanced over at Neji's teammate in confusion. How? It is because of the Hyuga clan Kekai Genkai, the genin in the green spandex replied as his bandaged hands clutched at the metal railing. When activated, the Byakugan allows the user to see 360 degrees. He can see what is happening in front of him, behind him, and to both sides of him at the same time, without moving his head. Neji knows exactly what these demons are doing. Oh, Naruto blinked. So, it's like he has eyes in the back of his head? The imp hurled its weapon and the guitar spun towards Neji's back. Seconds before impact, the Hyuga bent forwards so that the hefty weapon sailed harmlessly over him before it boomeranged back to its owner. Neji immediately straightened up and went back to standing perfectly still, which really seemed to make the 3 imps angry. Each imp took turns hurling its guitar at Neji and every time he dodged it by bending out of the way. He didn't even move his feet an inch. And the complete ease with which he dodged made the imps furious. They howled, pounded their chests, stomped their feet, and even dragged their claws over their guitar strings a few times, producing horribly, tooth-jarring sounds. And finally one of the trio had had enough and it charged the boy, wielding its instrument like a mace. Neji finally unglued his feet from the ground to leap over the low swing of the guitar and flip away from the attack. Seeing their fellow's success, the other 2 imps rushed in using their weapons in the same way. And Neji dodged them all with such skill that it looked like he was performing a choreographed gymnastic routine. This guy's good, Shin the Takinin muttered. It's like he's dancing, Hisa added. Enraged and frustrated, the imp's swings grew wilder and wilder until one clobbered another in the shoulder. The 2 imps immediately started shrieking abuse at each other, leaving only the 3rd imp to focus on pounding Neji into paste. Neji took advantage of the situation and finally moved to attack. The Hyuga easily slipped around the ungainly guitar and lashed out at the imp, with just 2 fingers on each hand. What the? Neji jabbed at the creature's long arms, and its instrument suddenly dropped from its grasp. The red imp howled in distress and tried to reclaim its weapon, but its arms no longer seemed to work. And then Neji struck again, an open palmed slap to its chest and another to its forehead. The demon made a horribly gurgling noise. Blood sprayed from its ugly, tusk-toothed mouth. And then it toppled backwards, bounced a bit on the ground, and didn't move anymore. How'd he do that? Naruto squeaked. He barely touched the thing. That is the special taijutsu style used by the Hyuga clan, Lee explained. Most taijutsu styles focus on dislocating joints or breaking bones, but the Hyuga's gentle fist uses chakra strikes to attack the internal organs. With the aid of their Byakugan's enhanced vision, they can even attack a target's chakra network to cause paralysis, and even kill. Holy crap! Naruto shuddered. I figured Neji would be a tough opponent, but this... The 2 remaining imps stopped their quarreling and gaped at the corpse of their third comrade. One recoiled with a fearful ape-like shriek. The other bellowed in rage and rushed to attack. Neji easily danced around the crude charge and stabbed at the creature's hairy back with several finger strikes. The imp stumbled and its heavy guitar slipped from its fingers. Before it landed face first on the ground, the long-haired boy slapped an open hand on the back of its neck, just below the base of the skull. Before the third imp could flee, Neji was charging with his deadly fingers poised to strike. The imp raised its guitar, turtle shell body facing outward like a shield, but the genin flipped up and over the monster, landing behind it. He whirled around before the quivering demon could react and dispatched it in an almost identical manner as he had with the second one. His fight had lasted several minutes, but when Neji went for the kill it took mere seconds. He didn't say a word or make any sound that any of the watching contestants could hear from the waiting area. The boy was calm and collected and completely focused on his task. And he didn't seem to think that he was done. Instead of relaxing and looking for the hidden proctor, Neji remained in a ready stance. He tilted his head ever so slightly to the left and to the right. And then he turned sharply to the left and ran at it. Nothing. What's he doing? Naruto muttered, puzzled. He must see something with his Byakugan. Lee said, bouncing on the balls of his feet with tense energy. But what? The air a few yards in front of Neji shimmered like a heat mirage and something dark and long, a tentacle, or perhaps a tongue, whipped out towards the boy. Neji dodged left, missing the whipping thing by inches, and kept running at what looked like thin air. The long tendril retracted back into the shimmering patch of air, but before it could lash out again Neji was on it. His hand darted out and stabbed at it. Nothing. He stopped his forward momentum and dashed left, arcing around for a flank attack on, nothing. Then he vaulted over, nothing, and resumed attacking the other side of, nothing. What the hell? Naruto wondered and scratched at the back of his head. What is it? Aside from that one brief sighting of the blurry air and that thing, the whip, the tentacle, the tongue, the whatever it was, Naruto couldn't see any target. But Neji apparently could see it just fine. The Hyuga flipped backwards, putting a few yards between himself and the invisible demon, and then hurled several kunai, which solidly sank into something that let out a loud, dry hiss. A lesser chameleon demon, Shikamaru said. They're big and sneaky, but stupid and slow-moving, except for its tongue. You sure that's what it is? Naruto asked. The Hyuga can see the chakra in it, Sasuke said from the far side of the waiting area as he gazed down at the fight with his Shari non-active. That thing's color-changing skin and camouflaging illusions are useless. He can see the chakra flowing and that's all he needs to see. That Byakugan can see chakra like the Shari non. Naruto sputtered. What else can it do? Its ability to see chakra is similar, but not the same, Sasuke replied, but didn't elaborate any further. The invisible reptile now was clearly marked with the 2 kunai poking out of its side. Neji circled around the hidden creature again and hurled several more knives, each one hitting its mark with another pained hiss. The chameleon's illusions grew hazy before breaking altogether to reveal a large horned lizard the size of a horse with a curled tail and bulging, whirling eyes. Angry colors, red, yellow, and black, pulsed over its scaly hide at eye-watering speed. If the colors were a warning, Neji ignored it. He attacked it from behind, leaping over its tail as the appendage uncurled to try and trip him. Scampering over its arched spine, he lunged forward and slipped his hands under the short bony frill that jutted off the back of its skull for another back of the neck strike. The lizard reared back almost in slow motion to try and dislodge Neji, but he glued his feet to it with shurika and stabbed at one of its turret eyes with another kunai. It shrieked and pitched over, but Neji was relentless and forced the blade deeper and deeper until only the handle was left protruding. The Hyuga abandoned his perch, then, and watched dispassionately as it slowly thrashed less and less. The colors flashed over its skin, slowed and paled. And then it faded to a murky gray-brown and its thrash weakened into feeble twitches. Genma was visible again, and he went about performing his duties as proctor of the finals. He checked each imp to confirm its state, and then checked the chameleon demon. Once that was done, he pulled out a small microphone so that his voice was carried over the stadium PA system. 3 kills and 1 mortal wound for Hyuga Neji, he announced to loud cheers from the crowd. Once the bodies are removed, the next match will begin. The Jonin put the microphone away and said a few words to Neji before the Hyuga turned and marched towards the waiting area. He was relaxed now, barely winded, barely even dusty. It was like he'd never been in a fight. "He's cold," Hisa commented with a shiver. "A pretty face, but ice in his veins." "My eternal rival is a fearsome shinobi," Lee said. "It's a good thing that we're fighting demons instead of each other for this test," Shikamaru remarked. "It would be really troublesome to fight him." "Yeah," Naruto silently agreed with a shudder. "I'm still going to fight him, though. I just need to train more." Naruto's blue eyes drifted over the demons Neji had slain and he gulped. "A lot more. But," he tightened his jaw, "I'll fight him and I'll beat him somehow because I said that I would." "That was brutal," Kiba grunted, scratching Akamaru under his chin. "It's a good thing you didn't fight him back in the Forest of Death, Hinata." "Why yes," Hinata squeaked, nodding weakly. "Whoa," Ino breathed. "Tenten, what's it like being on team with a guy like that?" "It can be difficult sometimes," the brunette replied. "He's a demanding training partner. But if he wasn't around, I'd have to train directly with Lee and Gai-sensei." Tenten shivered a bit. "It's good that Neji's on the team, I just wish he'd open up more." Hinata tapped her fingers together and stared down into the arena through the barely noticeable protective barrier. A cart pulled by several large Inyazuka dogs traveled from body to body and Ninja loaded the demon carcasses for removal. The chameleon was loaded first as it was the largest and took the longest, and the imps were piled on top of it. In less than 5 minutes the next fight would likely be able to begin. "Hey, Hinata," Ino said, making the Hyuga girl flinch. "You live with Neji. What's that like?" I don't live with Neji-san anymore," Hinata mumbled nervously. What does it have to do with anything?" "I'm just curious," Ino shrugged. "He's only about a year older than we are and he takes down 4 demons without breaking a sweat. He's sort of like Sasuke-kun, only Neji's a Hyuga." "Ino pig, quit being so nosy," Sakura chided. "One day your hunt for juicy gossip is going to get you into trouble." "Does anyone know who's going next?" Chuji asked around a mouthful of potato chips. "I can't remember," Sakura said with a frown. "I know that Sasuke-kun's going third. But who's going second?" Ino pouted. "It's on the screen now," Tenten told them, and they all looked up at the big screen at the far end of the stadium. The giant screen which had displayed the results of Neji's battle had now changed to show the name of the next genin to fight. Naruto. In a small break room tucked away in the bowels of the Hokage Tower, Anumbu lounged at the table and watched a closed-circuit television that showed what was going on across the village in the stadium. He was alone and would remain there unless or until he was needed. Hopefully there would be no need for his skills and he could stay in the break room and watch the finals, uninterrupted. But he didn't dare count on that. Earlier in the day, hours before the finals had started, unusual kunai had been distributed to all Umbu along with strict orders on their use. Should there be an attack on the village and should a certain code word be broadcast over their radio channels, the special kunai were to be used. If both conditions were not met, the blades should remain sheathed. Turnover in Umbu was high, so there were few agents that recognized the oddly shaped kunai and understood their use. Those that did made sarcastic comments about summoning werewolves or complained at how worthless these kunai would be. Those that didn't were puzzled until their seniors explained it to them, and then they mostly complained about carrying around extra equipment that wouldn't be useful. The orders came directly from the Hokage, though, so they all accepted the blades they were given and would carry out their orders should they be given. Mangetsu didn't complain about the kunai or receive any of the blades. He already carried a secondary weapon pouch full of them. Instead he waited in the break room and watched the finals. Naruto's up, he thought anxiously. Now I'll see if I taught him well enough that he doesn't have to draw on his, less acceptable abilities. Chapter 49, Maelstrom. Naruto stood flexing his fingers in nervous anticipation at the center of the arena. The murmuring crowd was an indistinct rumble in his ears, barely audible over the pounding of his own heart. Genma had already wished him good luck and vanished from view so that the demons wouldn't come after him and invalidate the test. 2 of the 5 barred gates slowly ground upwards with tooth-rattling squeaks and groans. When the portcullis-like gates were fully opened and the metallic grinding noises stopped, Naruto could hear animalistic growls and snarls floating out of the dark tunnels. The boy felt sweat prickling at the back of his neck and his knees felt shaky, but he stood as tall as he could as he waited for his opponents to appear. So it's only 2 demons, he thought as he stared at the open gates. That's half of what Neji had to deal with. It shouldn't be too bad. Right? With a sudden loud howl, a creature burst into the sunlight. It was a burly, furry quadruped roughly the size of an ox. It was mainly brown in color with narrow orange tiger-like stripes, a shaggy black mane, and a fluffy black tail. Long, curved teeth jutted from its black lips almost like boar tusks and bulging yellow eyes with slit pupils glowed from its squashed-looking face. It was part big cat, part dog, and all carnivorous demon. Komainu, lion dog. Then a second Komainu shambled into view from the second tunnel, hissing angrily over its shoulder at ninjas just out of view that were driving it out into the arena. It was almost identical to the first demon beast, only it was slightly smaller and had a few ugly scars on its hide. When the 2 beasts caught sight of each other, they immediately bristled and squared off, trying to gauge which one was stronger and therefore would be the dominant one. Fragments of the lesson on Komainu swirled through his brain as he watched them. There were at least a dozen different species of Komainu, if not more. They ranged in size from as small as a sheep to as large as a rhinoceros and came in all sorts of colors and patterns. Some had horns, some breathed fire, some had venomous bites, but all were powerful with sharp senses and excellent night vision. Okay, so, how do I kill these things again? They had dense manes and thick necks underneath them, and their hides were tough. He knew a few species had exploitable weaknesses like soft spots around the throat or underbelly. But he had no idea what kind of Komainu they were. Shikamaru would know for sure, maybe Shino would, too. Naruto frowned as he watched the 2 demons posturing to each other. All I know is that they're big and ugly. And they're definitely not the domesticated ones that monks breed to guard temples and shrines. The scarred Komainu bowed its shaggy head to the Belir beast. Satisfied that it was acknowledged as top dog, it bellowed and turned to survey its new environment. Its large yellow eyes locked onto Naruto quickly and the demon hissed in surprise. Then it stalked towards him, with its scarred comrade trotting a few steps behind. An icy shock of panic rushed over Naruto's body. Instead of taking cover in one of the small trees or bushes, or making some plan of attack, he just stood out in the open and puzzled over the Komainu's exact species. Now they weren't distracted with each other anymore and to them he looked like lunch. Crap. Kushina fisted her hands on her knees, clenching her fingers so tightly that her knuckles bleached white. She wanted to do nothing more than to fly down there and destroy the beasts that threatened her son. But even if she could have found some way through that barrier that protected the primarily civilian crowd, she wouldn't be fast enough to be able to prevent anything. And if she had interfered, he would have been disqualified and embarrassed in front of his peers and the whole village. So she sat stiffly in her seat and watched Naruto scrambled away from the snapping jaws of the Komainu, choked with helplessness. Come on, Naruto, come on. Komainu had stocky bodies, but they were fast like charging bears. They couldn't turn very well while they were sprinting, though. And that was the only thing that kept Naruto from being snapped up like a tasty snack. When the closer beast was on his heels, Naruto would turn sharply so it would overshoot him. But just as he would shake it that way, the second Komainu, which was several steps behind the first, would adjust its course and the genin would be back in jeopardy. Without any real escape from his foes, it was just a matter of time before he got too tired and too slow to avoid being eaten. Gureu! The scarred Komainu bellowed as it tried to trip Naruto up with a swat of its broad paw. Its sharp ivory claws only put a few tears in the edge of his new coat as he cut sharply right to escape its charge. Damn it! The fight was not turning out at all the way that he had wanted it to. Where Neji had been in total control, moving only when he wanted to, Naruto found himself running around like a headless chicken. If something didn't change soon, the proctor might have to bail Naruto out, which meant elimination from the trials and utter failure. No. Naruto twisted away from the bigger Komainu and slipped on a patch of bare dirt. The snarling beast put on the brakes and struggled to turn and pounce on him. But seconds before its attack could land, Naruto chucked a handful of dust and pebbles into its eyes and made it rear back with a shriek of pain. Take that! The boy panted as he staggered to his feet and lurched away from the temporarily blinded demon. Of course the scarred smaller demon was unaffected by Naruto's little attack and it closed in to pin the boy against the still dangerous larger Komainu. For a second, panic again chilled Naruto's veins and he almost bolted. But then a flash of an idea sparked in his brain and he grinned. His hands snapped through a few seals ram, bird, rabbit, and just as he was sandwiched between the scarred Komainu and the blinded one, he shoved his hands palms down to the ground. An explosive gust of wind blasted down and outwards, kicking up a dense cloud of dust that completely obscured the boy and both demons. The pair of Komainu howled and coughed in the dust pall, but whatever was going on inside was impossible to see. Then the scarred Komainu burst back into view of the audience, with 5 different Narutos clinging to its body, trying their best to drive kunai blades into its orange-striped pelt. The lion dog bucked and twisted, dislodging 2 of the boys and causing them to explode in puffs of white smoke. To destroy the remaining 3, the demon flung itself to the ground and rolled around, crushing them into nothingness. The dust was beginning to settle, revealing the bigger Komainu still sneezing and coughing and a 6th Naruto crouching nearby. Catching sight of its prey once more, the scarred demon roared and charged the boy. Naruto tried to jump aside, but the creature clamped its huge mouth around his middle. As it chomped down, the genin shoved a kunai into its right eye. Poof! The 6th Naruto popped, revealing itself to be another bunshin. The scarred lion dog didn't notice. It was too busy shrieking and flailing from its agonizing eye wound made by the genin's tagged kunai. SSH boom! With a flash and a roar, the exploding tag dangling from the ring of the kunai went off, destroying the beast's eye and a chunk of its thick skull. The Komainu jolted, bounced, and collapsed to the ground. It twitched so fitfully it looked alive, but its brain had been destroyed and once its heart gave out it would be completely dead. Naruto allowed himself a silent fist pump in his hiding spot in one of the small trees near the arena wall. 1 down, 1 to go. Learning that his primary elemental affinity was actually wind, not fire, had been something of a letdown during his training. The 4 other major elements looked so much cooler and more dangerous. And for him to be able to generate any sort of magical wind, he had to be almost completely human, otherwise his demonic fire nature would get in the way. He hadn't wanted to waste time with any futon techniques, but his father had insisted that he learn at least 2 basic jutsu. Unlike his blue kitsunebai, his wind chakra was thoroughly undemonic and safe to perform in front of other demon hunters. Futon jutsu were also supposed to be incredibly deadly once mastered, and they provided an excellent defense against Raiden attacks, for some reason. I guess it's a good thing I went along with the wind training. Naruto shifted on his branch perch and forced down his elation so that he could focus on Komainu number 2. And if Mom can get me a demonic dampening crystal like hers, it should be pretty easy to use wind whenever I want. The remaining Komainu had recovered from the dirt in its eyes and dust up its nose and was now warily scanning the arena. Its yellow eyes looked slightly orange from the irritation and it was either drooling or snot was dripping from its nose. And from all the snarling and growling it was doing, it was very pissed off. It's too bad that was my only exploding tag. Exploding tags were handy ninja tools, but they were also volatile and dangerous in inexperienced hands. Therefore, there were limits on who could have the special seal tags, and how many they could have at one time. Naruto, as a first-year genin with low grades, was only allowed one. And he'd used it up. I need to think of something else. His beastly foe started to circle outwards, casting its head from side to side in search of any trace of the boy. The Konoha was bristling as it slunk along, its fluffy black tail twitching at the tip like a cat's. Naruto watched it move with a sinking sensation as he reviewed the things he could do against the last Konoha. I don't know any cutting wind techniques, I'm out of explosives, I can't cast too many more Kagebunsins, I can't use my fire. The blonde genin sighed, letting his breath hiss through his teeth. I guess, I'll have to do what I did in the Forest of Death. So long as I don't go any further I should be fine. I think. Sasuke leaned against the metal railing of the observation area, his careless slouch hiding the tension in his muscles. It wasn't that he was deeply concerned by what could happen to Naruto, he wasn't. The atmosphere was electrified by everyone else's worry and he just couldn't help but feel it too, that was all. All the Konoha genin, especially those in Naruto's graduating class, knew how weak the blonde's ninja skills were. Perhaps if he had been pitted against a pair of green imps he might have had a good chance of success. But to face off with a pair of orange-stripped forest Konoha without any strong elemental jutsu, without any Kekai Genkai, and without any heavy weapons, the idiot seemed doomed to death. As much as he hated to admit it, Sasuke was rather impressed by how Naruto had dispatched the first Konoha. He'd gone from running around like a scared rabbit being chased by dogs to blowing out the eye of one of the giant carnivores, dealing it a fatal blow. If Naruto managed to kill the other one without taking any serious damage, Sasuke might be willing to find some little compliment to mutter at him. He's halfway done, but he's never going to finish if he just keeps hiding in that tree. The ex-Uchiha resisted the temptation to activate his Sharingan again to monitor his teammate's chakra signature. The more he used his Kekai Genkai outside of his own fight, the more chakra he wasted. And he hadn't come this far to blow it because he's overtaxed his eyes before he ever faced off against his own demons. Naruto dropped from the tree he'd been sheltering in and charged the second Konoha like a maniac. He was faster than before, sprinting low to the ground. The Konoha noticed him and whirled to face him just as Naruto arced left just enough to avoid its snapping jaws and punched the enormous creature in the side of the head hard enough to make it stagger. Whoa! Hissa the Takinin blurted out. Where'd that fierceness come from? Sasuke briefly activated his spinning red eyes, slowing the action and sharpening the details until he could see the thicker whisker markings, claw-like nails, fangs, and vertically slitted pupils. He's doing that thing that he did in the Forest of Death again. It had to have something to do with his lycanthropy, or whatever he really was. Somehow, maybe because he was a werewolf through heredity instead of through cursed bite, he could access a partial transformation and fully control it. It made him faster and stronger, strong enough to make a stocky, ox-sized demon stagger with one little punch. The Konoha tried to shake off the surprisingly strong blow, but Naruto was already moving again. The little ninja slung himself underneath the creature's belly and stuck it with a kunai while he was under there. It howled and bucked and Naruto was on its right side now, slicing at the back of its right hind leg trying to hamstring it. He's really going at it, Shikamaru muttered. Troublesome. Sasuke turned off his Sharingan before he forgot that it was still on. The lion dog twisted around with speed that belied its bulk and snapped at Naruto's head. Naruto rolled out of reach, abandoning his tendon attack, and dashed around behind it until he could slice at its left flank just behind the shoulder. The Konoha snapped left, only for Naruto to dive under its jaws and drive his second kunai into its neck as he came up on the other side. It raged on that way for several minutes. The Konoha would react to whatever small attack Naruto launched and the boy would dart out of range with his superior speed to attack again. Naruto seemed to have the upper hand, but with his small kunai he just wasn't doing enough damage to the demon. If he didn't pull off something deadly, like the exploding tag to the eye that he'd dispatched the first one with, he was going to run out of energy and lose. The death by 1,000 cuts is sort of impressive if you can pull it off, but really impractical, Shin the other Taki Genin remarked, fingering the hilt of one of his long knives. Sasuke silently agreed with the foreigner's comment. In the arena below, Naruto continued his speedy attacks that kept the Konoha off balance. He switched to shuriken to conserve his small supply of kunai, but the small throwing stars had an even harder time doing damage to the demon. The best strike that he managed was a shuriken to one of the beast's eyes, which half-blinded it. Then, as the Komainu made another lunge for the genin with its jaws open wide, Naruto flung a shuriken that whizzed down his foe's throat. The Komainu skidded to a halt and coughed, bringing up a spray of blood. It gagged and hacked and tossed its shaggy head, but it couldn't clear its gullet of the sharp object. The wound could potentially be fatal if the sharp arms of the star nicked a major blood vessel. But Komainu were tough creatures and it was equally possible that it could cough the shuriken up, heal, and survive. Naruto crouched a few yards away and watched the beast struggle. He seemed to hesitate for a minute or two before charging the monster head-on. Sasuke and the others didn't have the best view of what he was doing as his back was to them, but the ex-Uchiha guessed that he was readying a jutsu. And then there was a blast of air that kicked up a small cloud of dust around the beast. That wind attack again, Sasuke determined as he watched. Instead of aiming it down at the ground to hide, it looks like he aimed down the demon's throat. That could burst its lungs or stomach, if he's lucky. Distracted by the weapon in its throat, the Komainu was caught completely by surprise by Naruto's attack. It reared back with a gurgle and staggered backwards several steps. The beast wheezed and vomited a gush of bright blood before collapsing into a shuddering, gasping heap. The young ninja hesitated again, apparently trying to decide whether he needed to attack the creature again or if he should just wait for it to expire. Genma the proctor reappeared and strolled up to the creature, studying it carefully. After a moment's contemplation he nodded and brought out his microphone to make an announcement to the tensely quiet crowd. "One kill, one mortal wound for Naruto," the Jounin's voice declared over the PA system. "Once the field is cleared the next fight will begin." Cheers erupted from the stands as the tension broke. "Naruto-san has done it!" Lee cried, bouncing a little in excitement. "Barely," Neji said disdainfully. "Such a poor performance against so few targets will earn him a poor score." "Bad start," Shin remarked. "Better finish." "I hope I don't have to fight any Komainu, those things look mean," Hisa worried. "Not many ninja in Konoha have wind as their elemental affinity," Shikamaru sighed. "Finding a tutor for him will be troublesome." Shino hummed and adjusted his shades. All Dosu had to say was, "He survived, too bad." Sasuke kept leaning against the rail and watched as Naruto soaked in the audience's applause and cheers before Genma prompted him to get moving so that the carcasses could be removed. He did all right, for the dead last in the class. Kushina burst from her seat to cheer and dance a little as soon as the proctor announced his decision. Everyone else was cheering too, enthusiastic over the triumphant underdog. The redhead celebrated a bit longer than most of the people in her section before allowing Mikoto to tug her back down into her chair. "That was great." She grinned. "He scared me a bit, though, with that awful start." "So he's wind element," Mikoto commented. "Like Minato?" "Yep." Kushina nodded as she watched the dead Komainu being loaded into the cart for removal. "He didn't think it was that great, though." "I'm sure he feels differently now," the Uchiha woman replied. The second Komainu still had a bit of fight left in it, despite its grievous wound. So instead of just loading the creature onto the cart like they had with the chameleon demon that Neji had mortally wounded, they stabbed the second lion dog with long spears first. When it stopped breathing, they heaved the hefty creature into the cart with the first one and towed it away. "So, who's up next?" Kushina wondered. "Sasuke," Mikoto quietly replied. "Oh." Kushina settled back in her seat. "Well, he'll do fine. The question is, will he perform more impressively than Neji?" Mikoto said nothing, she just stared down into the arena waiting for her son to appear. Hinata forced her fingers to uncurl and was surprised to find that her nails hadn't pierced her palms. She'd felt little anxiety when her cousin had battled, she knew that he was strong. But Naruto wasn't strong like her cousin, and so she'd been on pin and needles from the moment that the Komainu entered into the arena. "It was alright," Kiba commented grudgingly. "Neji's fight was a lot better." "I guess," Choji agreed between mouthfuls of chips. "Naruto survived, and now it's time to watch Sasuke-kun." Ino squealed, bouncing in her seat. "Is that all you are looking forward to?" Tenten asked. "Well, I'm here to cheer Shikamaru on, too," Ino shrugged. "But seeing Sasuke-kun in action." The blonde shivered and smiled broadly. I have goosebumps. Ino pig, Sakura grumbled. It's not that big a deal. You only say that because you're on his team and you get to see him fight all the time. Ino shot back. Hinata tuned out their brewing argument and waited patiently for the next match to begin. Sasuke-san will do well, I'm sure, but he'll have to work hard to do better than Neji-san did. Naruto was tired, but he felt like dancing as he climbed the stairs back to the observation area where his fellow competitors waited. He'd done it. He'd won. He'd taken down 2 big, bad, meat-eating demons and barely come out with a scratch. I am awesome. There were a few words of congratulations when he rejoined the other genin, but it wasn't anything like all the cheers he'd received from the crowd. Lee was the most openly happy to see him, thumping him on the shoulder so hard that Naruto stumbled. The rest either nodded to him like Shino and Shikamaru, glanced at him curiously like the Tokinin, or were utterly indifferent to him like Neji and the bandage-covered Dosa. Sasuke said nothing as he slipped away down the stairs to take his turn in the arena. Knock those demons dead. Naruto yelled after him anyway. The black-haired boy hesitated a step, and then kept on going like he hadn't heard anything. So, what do you think he'll have to fight? Naruto asked as he sidled up to Shikamaru. Something similar to what Neji dealt with, probably, the Nara boy shrugged. Just as Sasuke reached the center of the arena, the gates started to open to release his opponents. Like with Neji, 4 of the 5 gates lifted. The crowd, which had been a bit rowdy since Naruto's come-from-behind victory, quieted in anticipation. A hulking yellow imp shambled into view first, its large drum tucked under one thick arm. It was the largest of the Asiatic imp varieties. They were burrowers, which was surprising considering their size. Yellow imps liked to hide underground to ambush people, and they used their drums to create localized earthquakes and fire blasts of compressed demonic wind. 2 blue imps appeared next. They had long, spidery limbs, and leathery flaps of skin like flying squirrels that allowed them to glide or hover over their prey. Their chosen instruments were whistles that doubled as blowguns which could fire poisonous pellets. They were fragile, but their limited flight capabilities made them tricky targets to hit. And from the 4th open gate came, nothing. Another lesser chameleon demon, Shikamaru predicted. He'll see that no problem with his Sharingan, Naruto said. All of those demons will test his Sharingan, Shikamaru replied boredly. The worst will probably be the yellow imp. The Sharingan can't see through things like dirt. Yeah, Naruto nodded as he watched the imps take notice of Sasuke and start to move in on him. He'll still kick ass and make us all look bad. The bastard. Troublesome, the Nara muttered, rolling his eyes. It has begun. Lee said, pointing into the arena. The yellow imp had vanished from sight, leaving only a large hole where it had burrowed down into the earth from. The blue imps had leapt upwards and were now hanging in the air, hovering through a combination of their skin flaps and their limited magical abilities. And the probably chameleon demon was still invisible to most observers. Sasuke, the former Uchiha, stood ready to meet them. Chapter 50, Mistrial. Sasuke felt no fear as he hurled himself against his demonic opponents. Fighting demons was what he had been trained to do since he was old enough to hold a kunai. Now it was time to put his skills to the test and prove he was good enough to become a chunin. He took down the blue imps first. Activating his Sharingan, he hurled 2 kunai, 1 for each floating demon. The diamond-shaped blades buried themselves into the creatures' throats and they crashed to the ground moments after they'd gone airborne. He paid them no more mind as they writhed and gurgled, choking on their own blood as they expired, and shifted his focus to his next target. The Genjutsu-cloaked lesser chameleon was the next creature he attacked. His spinning red eyes easily located the creature and he moved in for a little close combat. When it tried to snag him with its long, sticky tongue, his enhanced vision slowed down the whip-like appendage so that he had no trouble dodging it, and then slicing it in half. As the demon lizard hissed and flailed in agony, he aimed a fireball down its vulnerable throat. While its scaly hide was tough, its insides were not, and the single shot mortally wounded it, causing it to collapse to the dirt and lose its genjutsu cloak. The yellow imp burst out of the ground underneath his feet and Sasuke barely flipped out of harm's way in time. The hulking, gorilla-ish demon swung one of its stubby log-sized drumsticks at him before it started beating on its half-buried drum. As the tempo rose, the ground surrounding the creature started to shiver. Before it could reach a deadly crescendo, Sasuke backpedaled out of range while tying the end of a length of ninja wire to one of his shuriken. As it raised both its drumstick for the final bash which would trigger an intense earthquake, he flung the shuriken and wire, binding the beast's wrists. Startled, the imp stopped its attack and Sasuke blew a stream of fire down the wire, charring his foe's meaty hands and ugly face. Howling in agony, the imp lurched out of the ground and staggered around blindly as its hands and head still burned. Without its drum, with its hands bound, and blinded, it seemed like an easy kill. But the demon was heavy and strong, and when Sasuke dashed in close to try and sink a kunai into its heart, it snapped the wire around its wrists and almost clobbered him with a wild swing. His Sharingan saved him though, and with a little ducking and weaving he got in close and drove in one of his blades. With a pained cry of surprise, the yellow imp stopped, staggered, and fell backwards. After a few last wheezes, it was still. The yellow imp was dead. The lesser chameleon demon was dead. The two blue imps were dead. Sasuke had done it more efficiently than Naruto. He'd done it faster than Neji had. The crowd exploded in cheers even before Genma could make the official announcement of the ex-Uchiha's victory. That was a real demon fight, he thought as the proctor gave his official decision, not that anyone could really hear it. A real challenge. Not like that stupid extermination job with that hive of demon insects Kakashi-sensei had me roast. It was so cold it burned like fire. The agony exploded from the curse mark and spread all over his body in seconds. He grabbed at the spot and fell to his knees. Why is it hurting? That Umbu's seal should be helping. But it's like it's gone. Sasuke could do nothing but scream until the darkness rose up and swallowed him. Naruto instantly forgot any envious thoughts he'd had over Sasuke's nearly effortless victory as soon as the black-haired boy collapsed in screaming agony. All the genin in the waiting area crowded against the railing as they watched the proctor jog over to Sasuke's side. The roaring spectators were suddenly much quieter and the air was thick with tension. None of those demons landed a hit on him, Shin frowned. So why is he screaming like that? Was there a fifth demon? Hisa wondered. Only 4 gates opened, therefore, only 4 demons were released, Shino responded, adjusting his ever-present shades. Well then how is his skin turning gray? The Takikunoichi squawked. Naruto leaned further over the rail, squinting and shifting his eyes to improve his vision a little bit. Sure enough, Sasuke's skin was turning a pale gray. And his hair had lightened from solid black to a deep slate gray, and it looked like it was getting longer. What the hell? Naruto scowled as Genma took a step back from Sasuke's prone form. That's not normal. I'm guessing that's no secret Uchiha clan technique, Shin muttered, grasped the hilt of one of his long knives. Perhaps Sasuke-san is suffering from an ailment similar to what my teammate suffered in the Forest of Death, Shino speculated. Maybe this is what got Sasuke disowned by his clan, Shikamaru theorized. Most likely, Neji agreed. The Uchiha clan is very proud. No taint is permitted. Naruto tilted his head slightly in confusion as he watched Sasuke squirm and curl into a tighter ball. Could that nasty snakebite mark be doing this to him? But, I thought he had that thing taken care of. And then it started snowing, feathers. While the crowd's excited cheers dissolved into worried stares and anxious whispers, Kabuto watched the genin's agony with calm detachment. The silver-haired young man edged deeper into the shadow of the pillar he'd been standing near and started forming hand seals. When the sequence was complete, fluffy white feathers materialized in the air all around the stadium, drifting down like snow. The primarily civilian crowd grew quiet as people by the hundreds fell under the genjutsu spell and slipped into a deep slumber. Many lesser ninja also fell for the trick, collapsing unconscious before they realized what was going on. A few of the ninja in charge of maintaining the barrier around the arena pit even fell victim to the genjutsu, causing it to collapse. In minutes only the elite ninja and those prepared for the false feather snow were still awake. Kabuto adjusted his glass and turned his gaze up to the highest VIP box where the Hokage was seated. Any second now. Mangetsu frowned at the television screen. Sasuke was down and it looked like his curse mark was the cause. But that shouldn't be possible with the seal he'd surrounded the mark with. It was highly unlikely that Sasuke had willed the seal to fail, he'd already won his battle handily. So, Perhaps it had been tampered with? It looks like I'll have to go down there once he's off the field and reseal. Umbu's radio channels blazed to life. A massive genjutsu was being cast on the stadium, which the closed-circuit cameras couldn't detect as illusions only existed in the minds of those targeted. Enemy ninja were appearing out of the crowd. And something was going on in or around the Hokage's box. The messages were coming in hard and fast and overlapping each other, so it was difficult to pick out what they were saying. Scratch that, it seems that Sasuke will have to wait. As soon as the genjutsu activated, the Hokage broke its hold over him and was on his feet. His two Umbu guards had their weapons out and ready for an attempt on their leader's life. But it seemed that the Hokage was not the immediate target. HRK. Hiruzen turned just in time to see the Jounin sensei of the Taki Genin get speared by several white blades. One of the strange weapons had pierced his heart, and several others had stabbed through his lungs. The man was dead before he even finished crumpling to the ground. The assassin was the young sensei of the Oto Genin. The sickly-looking Otonin had the odd blades attached to his forearm. In fact, they looked like modified bones bursting through the young man's skin. That's a Kekai Genkai from Kirigakure, he noted. That clan supposedly went rogue and was eliminated several years ago. It looks like Orochimaru might have found a survivor. One of his Umbu moved to try and subdue the Otonin while the second stayed close. Several small explosions went off and the balcony was quickly enveloped in thick black smoke. Briefly disoriented by the loud bangs and the dense smoke, the Hokage had little chance to escape the hands that grabbed him around the neck and dragged him up to the red tile roof at the highest point of the stadium. Before more Umbu could arrive to save him, a square barrier was raised around most of the roof, generated by 4 young Otonin, one in each corner. The old Sarutobi frowned down at the flowing, intricately embroidered sleeve that was tucked snugly under his throat, holding him immobile. It doesn't suit you, Orochimaru. That's what I thought, his old student's soft dry voice hissed in his ear. But beggars can't be choosers. The Hokage grimaced and then stabbed a blade at his captor's middle while ducking down and away, escaping as the half-demon moved away from the sharp kunai. Hiruzen shed his hat and red and white formal robes as he moved, revealing his black battle attire and Hitaiate helmet that he'd been wearing underneath. He opened up a gap between himself and his attacker and started a brief standoff. He considered attacking the Otonin that has set up the barrier that kept him cut off from his Umbu and trapped with Orochimaru, but they were smart and skilled. The Otonin had not only generated barriers to keep him contained, but they had also sealed themselves off so no one from inside could harm them. One of his Umbu tried to crash through the barrier, but he was repelled and his cloak caught fire from the explosion of energy. No escape, unless I win. His gaze turned to his wayward student. The half-demon had cloaked himself in the skin of some wealthy merchant. Orochimaru smiled the doughy face he was wearing before peeling the flesh away, revealing the narrow reptilian features that Hiruzen was familiar with. I almost didn't bother with skinning that gooky fellow, the half-snake said conversationally. But I decided not to risk it. As angry as the Uchiha are right now, I can't count on them to not be paying attention. Orochimaru, why bother with this? Hiruzen asked tiredly. You have your own village to rule now. It's petty and disgustingly human, but I want vengeance, Orochimaru shrugged, almost cheerful. You denied me the position I desired and cast me out like trash just because I sought knowledge. You experimented on civilians, on orphaned children. The Hokage retorted. You betrayed the village you swore to protect and serve. Sacrifices must sometimes be made in order to expand our knowledge, Orochimaru replied, unconcerned as he shed the dead man's form and attire, returning to his usual appearance. I must say that my greatest regret as Hokage was in allowing you to escape instead of killing you that night, the old man sighed before steeling his nerves for battle. You should probably never have taught me to be a demon-hunting ninja, Orochimaru smiled coldly. As a Hanyu, I am superior to most purely human hunters. And through my hunts I have seen the ugliness in humanity, and the pure power of demonkind. Was there any other way that I could turn out? Sorrow weighed heavily in Sarutobi Hiruzen's heart. He couldn't forget the innocent boy that Orochimaru been. He couldn't reconcile how the bright boy, filled with raw talent, the thirst for knowledge, and the drive to do good could turn into the wicked creature that stood before him now. Are you just going to stand there? Both ninja flinched and turned, seeking the mysterious third speaker. It looked like they were the only two people within the barrier. But then Orochimaru leapt backwards as the air where he had been standing shimmered. Drat, I missed. The shimmering air solidified into a shabby old beggar. The old man was almost completely covered in a dark, tattered, mud-stained cloak. He was bent over and leaning heavily on a gnarled walking stick. An old man. Orochimaru hissed warily. That voice. Hiruzen eyed the figure cautiously. Where have I heard that voice before? Surprised. The beggar chuckled. I'm sure that you'll suffer plenty more surprises before this is all over. Kaito-san, the Hokage said, finally putting his mental finger on the identity of the speaker. Furukawa Kaito had been one of the previous emissaries from Uzushiagakuer no Sato, one of Uzumaki Kushina's predecessors. He'd been on duty in Konoha since before Hiruzen had been elevated to Hokage and had retired about 5 years before Kushina had come to take over his post. Considering how old he was supposed to be, Kaito should either be dead, or bedridden, and near death. But he's a kitsune, the Hokage reminded himself. He has a lot longer to live before old age really catches up with him. Perhaps I should have expected him to come. The old beggar straightened up and shed his cloak. Kaito, or at least his human form, didn't look a year older than he had the last day he'd been in Konoha decades ago. The crow's feet around his eyes weren't any deeper, there was the same amount of white in his hair, and his mangled ear was still his only notable scar. He even dressed the same in older-style blue uniform with a grey modern flak vest. The only thing he was missing was his Uzushio Hitai. Furukawa Kaito. Orochimaru narrowed his golden serpent eyes thoughtfully. I suppose your next big surprise is that you are part of a faction of Uzushio that remains allied with Konoha. He snorted a little. That's not much of a surprise. I never believed for a second that the entire village of Uzushiagakuer no Sato was fully behind the Kurohi clan's desire to destroy the leaf. No, Kaito shook his head and removed a crystalline necklace from under his shirt, tucked it into a little velvet bag, and put that into his weapon pouch. No, that's not it. I don't suppose that you ever found out where those kitsune children you received came from, did you? Kitsune are extinct, Kaito-san, Orochimaru replied. Poor little Naga, Kaito sighed. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. And then he dissolved into fog that swept over the enclosed section of the rooftop. Oh, you and your illusions, the half-snake sneered and went about destroying the genjutsu. But once Orochimaru had banished the fog, Kaito remained invisible. The Hanyu broke the second layer of the illusion, only to be greeted by a third layer, an explosion of angry giant wasps. And once that was dispelled, the Uzushionin was revealed again, now standing several yards to the left and closer to the Hokage and his attacker than he had been previously. Furukawa Katayo's ninja specialties were disguise and illusion. He could layer genjutsu several illusions deep, so no high-level demon or rogue ninja could catch on to him until it was too late. Unfortunately, Orochimaru knew how Kaito operated, and so he kept digging through the layers until he found what he was looking for. You should try something new, old man, Orochimaru chuckled darkly. Oh, but I am, Kaito replied. 5 blue fireballs materialized in the air around him with an eerie crackle. Orochimaru snorted and tried to dispel this new illusion. But the fiery orbs didn't vanish. Hiruzen hopped further away from his former student to what he hoped would be a safer distance. You really have no idea. Kaito grimaced, and then with a sharp gesture sent the Kitsunebai whizzing towards the founder of Otagakuer no Sato. As soon as Sasuke fell down screaming, Mikoto was out of her seat and looking for a way to get to him. Kushina muttered obscenities under her breath as she tried to follow through the crowded stands. But before they could make it to any staircases that would get them to the ground level, it started to snow feathers. What's this? Mikoto frowned, her Shari non-active as she stopped and looked around at the sleeping civilians around her. Nothing good, Kushina growled. Get ready. Ready for what? A few rows back, a civilian shed his coat and hat to unveil himself as an Oto ninja. He drew a kunai and lunged for the nearest targets, which happened to be them. Kushina snatched a drink cup from the loose grip of a nearby dozing spectator and hurled it at the charging man's face. Before the Otonin could recover from the distraction, Mikoto was on him, stealing the kunai from his hand and driving it into the side of his neck. Have I ever told you that I'm insanely jealous of your Sharingan skills? Kushina asked. Several times, Mikoto responded, wiping traces of blood onto the dying man's sleeve. Well, I'll say it again, the redhead sighed. I'm insanely jealous of your Sharingan skills. Why can't I have slow mo vision? Because you'd probably find all sorts of ways to abuse it, the dark-haired woman replied, glancing around. Not necessarily, the Uzumaki argued. There are a lot of them, the Uchiha said. All over the stadium false civilians were shedding their disguises and going on the attack. They outnumbered the active Konoha ninja at least 2-1, if not by a larger margin. The Otonin were out for blood and the Leafs defenders were hard-pressed to hold their own. And somewhere up in the VIP sections, there was an explosion. Do you want to go down the side of the arena instead of the stairs? Kushina asked. Yes, that would probably be faster, Mikoto nodded. A trio of Otonin converged on them, bounding along the tops of stadium chairs with weapons ready. So let's trash these jerks and get going. Kushina declared, drawing one of her concealed weapons. You don't have to tell me twice, Mikoto muttered. Naruto frowned at the snow of feathers. What the hell? How can it snow feathers? Where are those things coming from? He squinted at the fluffy white things as they drifted down. He could barely tell that they were feathers. It was like they were out of focus and half see-through. And for some funny reason he was starting to feel drowsy as he watched them. Oh, it's a genjutsu. Naruto shook himself, clapped his hands together, flared his chakra, and shed the illusion's hold over him. Duh. Blinking his fox eyes, he turned his attention to the other genin waiting with him in the observation area. Shikamaru was sleeping on the floor and Shino was leaning up against the concrete wall, also apparently napping. But Neji, Lee, Shin, Hisa, and Dosa were all still awake. Should we wake them up? The Takikunoichi asked, gesturing towards Shino and Shikamaru. If they can't detect and dispel an obvious genjutsu, they are no asset in battle, Neji said. Let them be. An explosion from somewhere up in the stadium seating brought all of those still conscious leaning over the rail and looking upwards. It was directly above them and with the high walls of the arena it was hard to see anything but some dark smoke. The barrier that sealed off the arena from the crowd was collapsing and the parts of the stands that they could see were erupting into battles between Konoha ninja and strangers wearing purple-tinged outfits. What the hell is going on? Shin demanded, staring at Neji. I have no idea, the Hyuga replied, a slight edge in his voice. This is obviously not Konoha's doing. Lee declared. Shin clenched his teeth. So you don't know what's going on in your own ville? Oh my god. Hisa squeaked and pointed frantically down into the arena. Look. Look at that. Naruto followed the older girls pointing and saw that Sasuke's transformation had taken an extreme turn. The back of his shirt was torn open and a pair of hideous wing-like things had sprouted from his shoulders. They were like bat wings, only stubbier and the fingers were thick and tipped with claws. That is really not normal, Naruto swallowed. Is there such a thing as a war-bat? Sasuke sat up suddenly and staggered to his feet. He stretched out his altered body and flapped his new wings experimentally. And then he turned around slowly, staring up at the high arena walls. When Naruto caught a glimpse of his teammate's face, he recoiled. The ex-Uchiha had black markings under his eyes and black lips with sharp protruding fangs. But his eyes were the freakiest. His irises had turned yellow, and the whites of his eyes were pitch black. The proctor, who had been distracted in observing what was going on in the stands up above, was now talking to Sasuke. But the transformed genin didn't react well to whatever the Jonin told him. He jumped away from the adult and raced towards the towering concrete walls. Flapping his ugly wings he managed to get halfway up it before losing lift and attaching himself to the side of the arena with chakra. Genma moved to pursue him, but a couple of the mysterious attackers dropped down into the arena pit and started to engage him. Where's he going? Naruto wondered as he watched Sasuke making his escape. What's he doing? He must be stopped, Neji decided. He doesn't appear to be in his right mind. I agree, Lee nodded. None of you will be going anywhere, Dosa told them. Naruto turned to scowl at the bandage-shrouded Oto Genin. What do you mean? The horrible ringing sound from the forest of death resonated throughout the balcony. The ground seemed to tilt and buck under Naruto's feet and he half collapsed, hanging onto the railing for dear life as he tried not to puke. Someone actually did start throwing up from their vertigo, but Naruto couldn't tell who. Doso calmly lowered the metal gauntlet that had generated the balance-destroying sound, drew a kunai, and marched over to Neji. He planted his foot between the Hyuga's shoulder blades, grabbed his long brown hair, and pulled back to bare the Genin's throat. The Otonin brought the blade to Neji's neck with a cold glint in his visible eye. No one will interfere with Orochimaru-sama's plans. That's it for part 16. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video.